Growing up, nobody in my house said, "I love you." The only time I ever heard anything close to it was when my mom was leaving for work, already halfway out the door, and she'd go, "Love you, bye," without looking back. And maybe once every couple of years, if she was in a really good mood, she might blow a quick kiss in your direction. And that was it. That was affection in our house. My dad never hugged me. My mom never hugged me. My dad never hugged my mom. Nobody touched anyone. I wonder how they made kids like us if they never hugged. And let me say this. My parents weren't bad people. I want to be clear about that. They kept a roof over us, we ate, school happened, but those two could not be in the same room for long without it turning into something. Fighting was just the weather in that house. Some days calm, most days not. So you just learn to read it fast and stay out of the way, or else, nobody ever celebrated a birthday in that house. Maybe they did before I was born. No one remembered my birthday, not once growing up. The only time something like a birthday celebration happened to me was in, I think 2001, I was 9, and my mom actually made a small cake. And I remember just looking at it on the table thinking, this might be the first time something actually happens for me. Finally. But my parents fought that day, and one thing led to another. The cake fell off and scattered, and that was my birthday. But at least I still got a cake. That was my 9th birthday. I was constantly walking on eggshells around my father. The constant cussing, being screamed at for minor things, not being taught a damn thing. You called names. Dumber than a stump was one of my dad's favorites. I also really remember being in elementary school and wishing my parents were like other kids' parents. I'd hang out with cousins or friends and see their parents were different than mine. One time at dinner, I asked my dad how come we never talk about each other's day like other families. He laughed at me sarcastically and loudly, and said, "This is real life. Life is not an American movie. Get back to reality. No one talks like that." Lo and behold, there are families who talk exactly like that. Even on vacation, and the few times we went anywhere, my dad would get impatient within hours, rushing everyone, getting annoyed if anything took too long. Eventually, he'd just go off and do his own thing. We'd barely see him, even when we were supposed to be together, and he wasn't really there. I think in 2003, my senior sister got her first period. I can recall vividly. At the room, she started crying. My mother said, "Well, you know what that is, don't you?" And that was that. Told her to get a pad from her room. That really stuck with me. But well, that's how it works there. Whatever it is, you deal with it on your own. I carried that into everything. I had people around me, but nobody actually knew anything real about me. I just stayed surface level with everyone. Easier that way. I have a girlfriend now. She's good. But I struggle with closeness with her, even when things are fine, even when nothing is wrong. Something in me keeps a distance I can't fully explain. Being that close to someone just doesn't sit right in my body sometimes. I care about her, I know that. I just don't always know how to show up the way she needs me to. I didn't know any of this had a name. I didn't know it counted as anything. I just thought I was somebody who wasn't built for closeness, that it was just how I turned out. There is a kind of person who can walk into a room full of people who genuinely care about them and still feel like they are standing behind glass. Everything reaches them slightly muffled, slightly delayed, as though the warmth in the room is real, but it is happening to someone else. They smile, they engage, they say the right things. And later, on the drive home, they feel the same quiet distance they have felt for as long as they can remember. Not sadness exactly, something underneath sadness. Something that was there before they had a word for it. You might know this person, you might be this person. They are the ones who accomplish something real. A promotion, a milestone, something they worked toward for months, and the feeling dissolves before the day is over. They hear the congratulations, they nod, they say thank you. And then inside, nothing has landed, as though the achievement passed through them without making contact, as though they watched it happen to someone wearing their face. They are the ones who give, constantly, their time, their attention, their energy. They show up first and leave last. They listen when no one else will. And they have never once asked for something in return, without guilt arriving before the words do, as though needing anything from anyone is a debt they have no right to create. so they carry everything alone and call it preference. They are the ones who someone looks at with genuine affection, a partner, a close friend, someone who truly sees them, and their first reflex is to pull back. Not because the affection is unwanted, because it feels misplaced. Like it was meant for someone more deserving and arrived at the wrong address. Warmth, for them, does not feel like warmth. It feels like a test they are about to fail. And they are the ones who the world has always described with the same words: strong, independent, reliable, low maintenance. They have heard these words so many times they have built an identity around them. And not once have they felt any of those things from the inside. From the inside, there is only a quiet exhaustion that never fully lifts, and a question they stopped asking years ago because the answer never came. Why does everything I do for others come so naturally, and everything I need for myself feel so impossible? These look like separate things, personality traits, temperament, just the way you are built. They are not separate, as every single one of them leads back to the same place. One quiet thing that happened a long time ago, or more precisely, one quiet thing that never happened. Something so silent, so ordinary, so invisible that you may have lived your entire life without recognizing it as the thing that shaped everything. And it has been running beneath every relationship, every decision, every silent moment of self-doubt you have ever carried, without you knowing it was there. It begins with something so ordinary you would never think to call it damage. A parent in the house, present, physically there, cooking dinner, paying bills, driving to school, doing everything a parent is supposed to do on the surface. But when the child speaks, something is missing from the response. Not anger, not cruelty, just distance. A flatness behind the eyes. A gaze that lands near the child but never quite on them. Maybe the parent was carrying their own grief. Maybe depression had hollowed them out long before the child was born. Maybe financial pressure had eaten through every ounce of emotional bandwidth they had. Maybe they were raised the same way, in the same silence, and simply did not have the language for closeness because no one ever spoke it to them. This is not about a bad parent. And this is about what a child's brain does when it reaches for connection. And the air where a response should be is just air. Because the reason behind the silence, the parent's exhaustion, their illness, their own unhealed wounds, none of that changes what the child's nervous system recorded. To a developing brain, there is no difference between a parent who ignores out of cruelty and a parent who ignores out of incapacity. The absence registers the same way. Every single time. The brain does not interpret motive, it only registers. I reached, and nothing came back. Developmental psychologist Donald Winnicott spent decades studying what happens in those earliest moments between a parent and a child. And he observed something that, once you understand it, changes everything. When a baby looks into its mother's face, in those first months, those first years, what the baby is actually seeing is itself. The parent's face is the child's first mirror. When the parent responds with warmth, the child receives a reflection. I am wanted. When the parent responds with attentiveness, the child receives, I am real. When the parent's eyes light up at the sight of them, the child receives the most fundamental confirmation a human being can get. I exist, I matter, I am here, and someone knows it. When that mirror is blank, when the face is there but the response is not, the child does not simply feel unloved. The child looks for its own reflection and finds nothing. And from nothing, no solid sense of self can form. Not shattered, not broken, never built. This is what was happening beneath those quiet, ordinary moments. Beneath the unanswered question at the dinner table. And beneath the drawing that no one looked at. Beneath the excitement that was met with silence. The child's brain was not just experiencing disappointment, it was being shaped by it, structurally, neurologically. When a child reaches for connection and gets nothing, the brain does not file it under sad moment. It files it under threat. The stress response activates. Cortisol, the body's alarm chemical, floods the system. And when that activation happens not once, not twice, but hundreds of times across the span of a childhood, the nervous system does what nervous systems do. It adapts, it rewires, learns a new baseline. And the baseline it learns is this. Reaching out is dangerous. Needing someone leads to silence. The safest thing you can do is expect nothing, need no one, and make yourself small enough that the absence cannot hurt you. From the outside, this child looks fine, quiet maybe, easy, independent, no trouble at all. From the inside, their entire emotional architecture has been reconstructed around one principle: do not reach, do not need, do not take up space that will go unmet. But the brain did not stop there. Because silence does not just teach a child to withdraw, it teaches them something far more dangerous, something that would go on to shape every relationship, every achievement, every quiet moment of self-doubt for the rest of their life. It taught the child to build, to construct an entirely new version of themselves designed for one purpose: to never be ignored again. And what that child built, the person they became in order to survive the silence, is almost certainly the person you are still living as right now. Picture a child, 8 years old. They come home from school holding something they made, a drawing, nothing extraordinary, just something they poured themselves into for an afternoon, something that felt like it mattered while they were making it. They walk through the door already holding it up. The parent is on the phone. The child waits. The parent finishes the call, moves to the kitchen, starts something else. The child follows, holds it up again. The parent glances, not at the drawing near it, says something like, "That's nice," and turns back to what they were doing. The child stands there for a moment. Then they take the drawing to their room. They put it in a drawer. They never bring it up again. One moment, almost nothing, now multiply it. Hundreds of times across the length of a childhood, to different versions of the same event. The question that gets no answer, the excitement that lands on a flat surface, the tear that falls in a room where no one turns around. Each one, on its own, barely registers. Together, they teach the child something that will govern the rest of their life. The child does not learn, "My parent is busy." The child does not learn, "This is a bad moment." The child learns something far deeper, far more permanent, and they learn it without a single word being spoken. My need is the problem, and I'll be honest with you, because I think most of us did this. At some point in childhood, without anyone telling us to, we just learned. We learned to adjust, to shrink the want before it even became a request, to stop bringing things to people because we already knew, somewhere quiet inside us, and what the response would be. Not silence exactly, just not enough. And so we just stopped reaching, stopped showing, stopped wanting out loud, and called it growing up. I want to know, was it just me, or did you do that too? That moment where you just quietly decided something wasn't worth wanting anymore. What was it for you? Tell me in the comments. Not the silence, not the absence, my need. The fact that I wanted something, the fact that I held something up and expected someone to look. That is what caused the emptiness. That is what must be removed. And so the child begins to do something remarkable, something that, if you understood the full weight of it, would break your heart. They begin to systematically erase their own needs, not all at once. Gradually, quietly, they stop asking for things, and they stop showing excitement about things. They stop bringing their inner world to anyone, because every time they did, the response taught them the same lesson. What you carry inside is not important enough for someone to stop and look at. This is not a conscious decision. No child sits down and decides to disappear. It is the brain doing what brains do, identifying the source of pain and eliminating it. And the source of pain, as far as this child's brain can calculate, is not the parent's absence. It is the child's own wanting. So the wanting goes quiet, then the asking goes quiet, then the showing goes quiet. And eventually, the child themselves goes quiet, not on the outside where they may still function perfectly, but on the inside where the person they actually are retreats behind a wall they will spend the next 20, 30, 40 years living behind. Physician and trauma researcher Gabor Mate described this as the most fundamental sacrifice a child can make. Every child, he argued, needs two things simultaneously: attachment to the parent and authenticity to themselves. Connection and truth, the need to be close and the need to be real. In a home where the child's realness is met with response, both survive. The child gets to be close and honest, loved and themselves. But when authenticity, when being real, when expressing need, when showing emotion, is consistently met with nothing, The child faces an impossible equation. They cannot have both. And between connection and truth, the child will always choose connection, every time. Because attachment is biological survival. A child cannot live without it. So they sacrifice truth. They sacrifice themselves. And they learn to show only the version that does not get ignored. The quiet version, the easy version, the version that does not need, does not ask, does not take up emotional space. And the version that was real, the one that had wants and fears and excitement and grief, that version goes underground, not destroyed, just silenced, buried beneath the adapted version that learned how to survive in a home where being yourself was met with nothing. And here is what makes this so difficult to recover from. The child does not experience this as a loss. They experience it as growing up. They experience it as becoming mature. They experience it as learning how the world works. The adaptation feels like wisdom because it reduces pain. It feels like strength because it eliminates vulnerability. It feels like identity because it is all they have left. By the time they are an adult, they do not remember that there was ever a different version of themselves underneath. The adapted self is not a mask they are wearing. It is the only self they know. And everything they have built, every relationship, every habit, every way they move through the world, has been built by this adapted version, a version that was engineered in silence by a child for one purpose, to ensure they would never face that emptiness again. But the adapted self did not just hide the real one, it built an entire life. And that life, the one you may be living right now, has patterns in it that do not make sense until you trace them back to the silence they came from. The first thing the adapted self builds is generosity, not the kind that comes from fullness, the kind that comes from a calculation so old it has no memory of being made. The child learned something early. There were moments, rare, brief, inconsistent, when the parent did respond. And almost always, those moments came when the child was useful. When they helped, when they were quiet and easy, when they solved a problem or carried a weight that was not theirs to carry. In those moments, something flickered, a glance, a warmth, something close to being seen. And the child's brain, desperate for any pattern it could control, drew a conclusion. I am not love for existing. I am love for what I provide. That conclusion does not expire when the child grows up. It simply changes shape. And the child becomes the adult who volunteers before being asked, who listens to everyone's problems and absorbs them as though they are their own, who gives their time, their energy, their emotional reserves without limit, and feels a wave of guilt on the rare occasion they consider saying no. They are not generous because they have too much to give. They are generous because they learn that giving is the only transaction that reliably produces warmth. They are still earning the attention that was supposed to be free. And the tragedy that lives at the center of this pattern is simple. It never works. Attention purchased with labor does not feel like love. It feels conditional. It feels like something that will be revoked the moment they stop performing. So they never stop. And they give and pour themselves into others until they're running on nothing. And still, underneath all of it, the same feeling persists. The feeling of being fundamentally unseen. Because you cannot earn your way into being valued. You cannot perform your way into mattering. What they are looking for was supposed to arrive without a price, and no amount of giving will make up for the fact that it never did. But the adapted self did not stop at generosity. It built something else, something the world admires even more. Independence, the adult who needs no one, who handles everything themselves, who never asks, never leans, never places their weight on another person. The world calls this strength, self-sufficiency, maturity, and in some cases, it is. But in the case of the ignored child, independence is not a choice. It is a sealed door. They do not refuse help because they do not need it. They refuse help because accepting it would require admitting need. And need, the simple human act of needing someone, was the first thing they learned to kill in themselves. It was the thing that caused the silence. It was the thing that every time it surfaced was met with nothing. So they locked it away, and they built a life that never requires them to unlock it. They carry everything alone, not because they are strong, because the alternative, reaching out and receiving nothing, is a pain they decided as a child they would never feel again. From the outside, they look like they have it handled. From the inside, they are living in a room they built to protect themselves, and they lost the key a long time ago. And then there is the pattern that confuses everyone, including the person living inside it. They can read a room the way most people read a page. They walk into a space, and within seconds they know who is upset, who is pretending, who needs something, who is about to leave. They are the person everyone comes to because something about them feels safe. Something about them makes other people feel understood in a way they cannot find anywhere else. This ability is real. It is not performance, but its origins are not what anyone assumes. And this was built in childhood, in a home where the emotional environment was unpredictable. The child had to develop a surveillance system just to feel safe. They learned to read their parents' face the way an animal reads the weather, not out of interest, but out of necessity. Is it safe to speak? Is it safe to be in the room? Is the silence about to get heavier? Every micro-expression, every shift in tone, every change in body language, the child cataloged it all. Not for connection, for survival. And that system, refined across years, became the extraordinary empathy they carry as an adult. They can map someone else's emotional interior with surgical precision. They can feel what others feel before others feel it themselves. But there is a cost that almost no one sees. That surveillance system was aimed outward from the very beginning, toward the parent, toward others, toward the room. It was never turned inward. Ask this person to describe what someone else is feeling, and they will do it with a depth that startles you. Ask them what they themselves are feeling right now. And there is silence, not evasion, blankness. They genuinely do not know. The instrument that reads everyone else has never been pointed at the one person who needed it most. And this leads to perhaps the most disorienting pattern of all. And they spend years, sometimes decades, craving something. To be seen, truly, deeply seen, not for what they do, for who they are. It is a hunger that sits beneath everything and colors every relationship they enter. And then, one day, it happens. Someone looks at them with genuine love, a partner who is consistent, a friend who says something real about how much they matter, someone who sees past the adapted self and reaches for the person underneath. And they flinch, not because they do not want it. They want it more than they have ever wanted anything. But the wanting and the receiving are two entirely different systems. And the receiving system was never installed. Their nervous system spent its entire formation in the absence of this. It calibrated to silence. It learned that love is a temporary accident that will be corrected. Just so when love arrives, real, consistent, present, the nervous system does not register relief. It registers disruption. It registers danger. Something is different. Something has changed. This cannot be trusted. So they pull back. They deflect the compliment. They create distance in the relationship that was getting too close. They sabotage the very thing they have been searching for. Not because they are broken, but because their body was trained in a world where this did not exist, and its arrival feels like a warning, not a gift. And beneath all of it, beneath the giving, the independence, the empathy that reads everything except itself, the flinch when love arrives, there is one thing running silently underneath. One belief so deep it has no voice, so old it has no memory of being formed. So constant it feels less like a thought and more like the temperature of the room. The belief that something is fundamentally wrong with them. Not that they were ignored, that they were the reason. That if they had been more interesting, more lovable, quieter, louder, easier, harder, different, in some way they have never been able to identify, the parent would have looked up, would have responded, would have seen them. This belief does not announce itself. It does not arrive as a clear thought you can challenge. It lives underneath thought. It shows up as the reason they apologize before they have said anything wrong. The reason they walk into rooms they earned their place in and feel like an imposter waiting to be discovered. The reason they can stand in front of someone who loves them completely and still feel somewhere beneath the surface that it is a mistake, that the love is misdirected, that if this person truly knew them, the real them, the one underneath the adaptation, they would leave. Every one of these patterns, if in the giving, the walls, The empathy turned outward, the flinch, and the belief underneath was built by a child, in silence, without guidance, without understanding, a child who did the best they could with a situation they did not choose and could not change. None of it was a flaw, none of it was a defect. It was an operating system, written in the dark by someone too young to know what they were writing, and it has been running unchecked and unnamed ever since. If everything you have been hearing traces back to your life, type this in the comments right now. I was never too much, I was just never met. Don't overthink it, just type it. And if this is the kind of space you have been looking for, subscribe. There is more here for you, but there is a question that you may be asking right now. If this has been shaping everything, every relationship, every reflex, every quiet moment of doubt, why did they never see it? Why did they go their entire life without knowing this was there? Because the wound erased its own evidence. That is why. That is the entire reason you never saw it. There was no event, no single moment you can point to and say, that is when it happened. There is no scar, no hospital record, no story you can tell someone over dinner that makes them understand the weight of what you carried. Physical neglect leaves proof. Emotional neglect leaves nothing. Nothing except the person it shaped. And so you did what anyone would do with a wound that leaves no mark. You questioned whether it was real. You measured your pain against the pain of others and decided yours did not qualify. You told yourself, maybe for years, maybe your entire life, that nothing really happened, that you had food, you had shelter, you had a parent who was there. And compared to people who had it worse, what right did you have to call any of it damage? That voice, the one that minimizes, that compares, that insists you're making something out of nothing, that voice is not reason. It is the wound talking. It is the silence, still running its program, still telling you what it told you as a child. What you feel is not important enough for anyone to stop and acknowledge, not even you. And the world reinforced it every single day. Because the world looked at the adapted self, the one who needed nothing, achieved everything, gave endlessly, carried it all without complaint, and called it admirable. Your independence was applauded. Your resilience was celebrated. Your ability to handle everything alone was held up as proof that you were fine, that you had turned out well, that whatever happened or did not happen in that house, it clearly was not a problem. Look at how well you function. And so you never questioned the adaptation. Why would you dismantle something the world keeps rewarding? Why would you look beneath the surface of a life that, from the outside, appears to be working? Because from the outside, it is working. It has always been working. That was the entire point. The adapted self was built to work. It was built to function so smoothly, so reliably, so impressively, that no one, not the world, not the people closest to you, not even you, would ever think to ask what it cost. But the absence of something essential does not stop being an absence just because you learn to survive without it. A house without air is still a house without air, even if the person inside it learned to take shallow breaths and call it normal. What happened to you was real. It was always real. And the reason you could not see it is because the wound itself was built to be invisible, to you most of all. But now you can see it, and that changes everything. Not because the past can be rewritten, but because the program that has been running beneath your life, the one that was written in silence by a child without your permission, can be rewritten starting now. The same brain that learned silence can learn sound. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. The same neuroplasticity that allowed a child's nervous system to rewire itself around absence. To learn that reaching is dangerous, that needing is shameful, that love is something to brace against, that same mechanism works in reverse. The brain does not stop adapting at 18. It adapts for as long as it is alive, and it adapts to whatever it is given, which means the program can be rewritten. Not by understanding it, although understanding is where it begins, but by doing something the silence never allowed, by reaching out. And this time, letting what comes back actually land. Every time you say what you're actually feeling, not the edited version, not the safe version, the real one, your brain registers a new data point, as one that contradicts the old program, one that says, I spoke, and the world did not go silent. Every time someone offers you warmth and you let it stay instead of deflecting it, instead of making a joke, changing the subject, pulling away, the nervous system receives an update it has been waiting decades for. Love arrived, and it did not disappear. Every time you choose what you need, even when the guilt floods in, even when every cell in your body screams that you are being selfish, that you are asking too much, and you choose it anyway, you are directly reversing something that was installed before you were old enough to resist it. These are not dramatic acts. They will not look like healing from the outside. They are small, quiet, almost invisible, just like the wound was. And that is exactly what makes them so powerful. Because every small act of honesty is the exact same size as the silence it is replacing. Every time you let yourself be seen, truly, without performance, without earning it first, you are contradicting a lesson that took an entire childhood to learn. You are doing, in a single moment, what silence spent years preventing. That is not self-help. That is revolution. Quiet, repeated, daily revolution against a program that was never yours to begin with. But there is one more thing, and it may be the most important thing in this entire conversation. The silence that shaped you did not begin with you. Think about the parent who could not see you, the one whose face was blank, whose response was missing, whose presence was physical but never quite emotional. That parent was not born that way. Something shaped them too. Someone failed to see them, someone failed to respond to their reach. Someone, their parent or their parent's parent, passed down the same silence without ever knowing they were passing it down, because they never had a name for it either. Emotional neglect moves through families the way language does, without instruction, without awareness, simply by immersion. Each generation absorbs the silence of the one before and transmits it to the one after. Not out of cruelty, out of repetition. You cannot give what you were never given. You cannot model what was never modeled for you. And so the silence continues, decade after decade, parent after child after parent, each one carrying a wound they do not recognize, each one passing it forward without knowing they are holding anything at all. Until someone stops, until one person in that chain, one person who grew up in the silence, who adapted to it, who built an entire life around surviving it, decides to look at it directly, to name it, to understand what it did, and to choose for the first time not to pass it forward. When you heal from this, you are not just changing your own life, you are ending something that may have been running through your bloodline longer than anyone can remember. The ignored child who learns to see themselves becomes a parent who sees their children. The one who learns to speak becomes the one who teaches others that their voice matters. The silence stops, not with a shout, but with one person who finally decided they were allowed to take up space. That is what healing looks like, not perfection, not the erasure of everything that came before. Just one person choosing, over and over in small and quiet ways, to stop living by a program they did not write. You were shaped by silence, but you are not made of it. And the person you were before the silence taught you to disappear, they are still in there. And they have been waiting, not for rescue, just for permission. You can give that to yourself now. No one else needs to go first. If you recognize yourself somewhere in this, in the giving, in the distance, in the flinch, in the silence that you carried so long you forgot it was heavy. Tell me in the comments, if this gave shape to something you have carried your whole life without language for it, support it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. This space is for the ones who are learning slowly and on their own terms that silence was never the answer, even when it was the only option they had.